Hello, and welcome to another episode of Just the Tips. I am your host, Lab Monkey, as is our customary way of doing things. I will be bringing this episode to you by myself because I have something very near and dear to everyone's hearts, I think, to talk to you about today. And interestingly enough, this particular topic was brought to my attention not too long ago by a discussion that was being had in one of our Senate Alliance channels. And that discussion was revolving around how many dark side versus light side relics people had on their roster. And this was something that I had never really considered. Not. I mean, not specifically, anyways. Of course, there are all sorts of subconscious considerations that one makes about their roster. But consciously, I had never really taken the time to look to see exactly how many light side versus dark side relics I had on my roster. And this question led me to an interesting additional question, which is how does one go about evaluating which characters they're going to give relics to? And so that's going to be the topic of this particular podcast episode. And I realize that this may be a lot of fairly obvious information to a lot of people, especially if you're a longer time player. You have basically made this decision again and again and again for your particular roster. And so I'm sure that you have a system that you kind of go through, either consciously or subconsciously, uh, with which you make those decisions. And so for those players, I may not be giving a whole lot of new insight to with this, but hopefully there will be still some nuggets or maybe one little piece of evaluating that you hadn't really considered before that might help you in the future. But this particular episode is more geared toward the newer and mid-game content. The players who are still trying to find their way in the game and or have found their way into the game, but are struggling to make an informed decision about what direction to take. This game is 5 years old, and there are many, many different routes that one can take. Even as late as as endgame, there are still decisions that have to be made that are very impactful for many late game players, especially the ones that don't spend a lot of money to just keep up with every single thing that comes out. So, with no more ado, hopefully this is somewhat helpful to everyone who's listening, or at the very least enjoyable. And if not, then I do apologize and hope that you will enjoy my next episode a little bit better. So, anyways, this topic is how do I decide who I'm going to relic? And just off the bat, let's set some ground rules. Galactic Legend and Epic Confrontation characters are not being considered in this decision tree. I'm assuming that if you have spent the resources required to get one of those characters, that you are obviously going to relic them. If you are, for some reason, not doing that, and you have the capacity to relic them, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe maybe DM me and tell me what your reasoning is, and we can have a conversation about that. But anyways, let's not consider any of the GLs or the epic confrontations like Gas or Malik. Let's talk more about legendary and below, because that's really where the main decision tree branches off. So, the other caveat I'd like to throw out before I actually dive in is that remember that rosters are different, and the makeup of one's roster will shift the value and or the priority on who you need to relic based on how your roster is currently constructed. So certain characters may have a lot more value to one player versus another player, depending on what other characters they currently have available to them. And I'll touch a little bit more on that briefly, I think, during the main part of this episode. But I just wanted to throw that out there. Remember, there is no one size fits all recommendation. If anybody is out there and is telling you otherwise, then don't listen to them, because there's very little value in listening to someone who thinks that there's only one path in this game, because there really isn't. The third thing that I'd like to throw out there is that there is lots of subjectivity here. And not only will there be some objective measures that you can say, well, of course, this character is better than that character and more valuable, but there will be other characters of very similar value that will lend itself to a lot of subjectivity here. So keep that in mind as well. The characters that I talk about and that I may or may not recommend in this episode, don't take this as gospel. Again, there are a lot of different factors to consider, and certain people may not use characters the exact same way that other ones do, in terms of what they use to counter, whether they use offense or defense, etc. So, lots of subjectivity here, which is why this is such an interesting topic in my mind. So, all right, without doing any more delay here, here's the way that I currently break down characters in terms of who I am considering to relic. For me, in my mind, a character needs to fall into at least one of these three categories to be even considered for relic on my roster. The first category is they are a galactic legend and or epic confrontation character requirement, or perhaps even a legendary character, if that. I don't think there are that many legendary characters outside of Jedi Knight Luke that require relics, but just to throw that out there, if the relics are required, then they're in this list too. So, characters like Cad Bane. Cad Bane is relic on my roster right now, and the only reason that he is relic is because he was a requirement to be relic for Jedi Master Kenobi. That is literally the only reason. Otherwise, he would not be relic. Second category is characters that were kind of part of your early game, your very first or maybe even your second squad arena teams or fleet arena teams that you kind of needed to get off the ground before you had a GL. So these are characters like Jedi Knight Revan or Padme, or sometimes Sith Empire like Darth Revan. These are characters that could have been your very best team at some point in the early to mid game. And of course, it's perfectly fine to relic characters for that reason, to get higher payouts in squad and fleet arena and keep that crystal income flowing. So that's the second category that I have characters. And then the third category is kind of it is a much more inclusive category. This will be a very broad category, and this is where most of the subjectivity is. So category 3 is a character who is a very strong individual character who transforms their team into something much better. Or perhaps it is, that last one or two characters that you need to complete a very strong team in order for them to function the way that they need to function. Or perhaps it's a character or characters that you need in order to complete certain missions and territory battles. Shaak Ti and the clones would be a very good example of this. And until recently, Shaak Ti was, I think, the prime example of this character, where she's a fine enough character on her own, but the reason that you need to relic her above anything else is so that you can complete the Ki-Adi Mundi mission in Lightside Geonosis territory battles. And of course, now she is a Relic 7 requirement for Jedi Master Kenobi, so she starts fitting into multiple categories herself. But so that's category 3 is characters that have one or maybe two very strong individual purposes outside of being a requirement for something else. So let's dive in a little bit and do a couple of examples, and then I can kind of show you where my head is at whenever I'm making my own decision trees here. So category one, I mentioned Cad Bane as a prime example of a galactic legend or epic confrontation requirement. Um, he doesn't have a whole lot of use now. Granted, he has a ship that's halfway decent, and that's fine. But honestly, Cad Bane in and of himself, like you can get away with a G12 Cad Bane. Um, if you don't need him for Kenobi, he's just fine at Gear 12. Like there's no real reason to relic him. He's a pretty poor squad character. He doesn't really fit into the bounty hunter or any scoundrel teams. He's very slow base speed. His kit, it's okay. Like he's got a double tap and he's got a stun and turn meter reduction, but nothing earth shattering or game breaking. So he's definitely very low on my list of priorities to relic up. Um, he is kind of in the similar vein. I'm going to do one. I'm going to give one example of each character from each GL requirement. Okay, so Princess Leia, she is not a good character, but she is going to be reliced on a lot of rosters because she is a requirement for Jedi Knight Luke, who is a requirement for Jedi Master Luke. So you're going to see a lot of Princess Leia's who are reliced. I mean, that's just how it is. If you're going for Jedi Master Luke, you got to relic her. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend it because she's not a very good character. Captain Phasma, she is not a good character, and you should not have her relic unless you're going to get Supreme Leader Kylo, and then you have to relic her. So, if you see Phasma relic, you should also see a Supreme Leader Kylo on the roster. Otherwise, that was a very poorly constructed roster. Poe Dameron, the pilot, like the original Poe, the one that taunts and exposes people and then just dies because he's a terrible squad character. That Poe Dameron, he's required for Galactic Legend Rey, and if you are getting Rey or have Rey, then you got to relic him. But otherwise, don't relic him. He's bad. And then lastly, Darth Maul. And fortunately, we're going to get a new and improved version of Maul. But the current version that we have in the game is really bad, really sad, very, very not worth the cost of relicking him. But if you're going to get Sith Eternal, gotta relic him. So there are several other characters who fall into this first category, but also fall into other categories. So I'm going to talk about them in a little bit. But those five characters I wanted to touch on, they only singularly fall into that one category. Please don't relic them unless you're going for their GL because they're really bad. Okay, so the second category is if they were part of your early to mid game, squad or fleet arena teams. So characters that belong in this category would be like Jedi Knight Revan, who is still an amazing character outside of this category. I would also put him in category 3. But for a lot of people, Jedi Revan was one of their first main squad arena teams, including my own. So he belongs here. Padme is another one. During the Darth Revan meta, I did not have Darth Revan, didn't have the resources to get him, but I had Padme because she kind of double dipped into fleets for me as well. And Padme is able to beat Darth Revan if you mod her correctly. So she was my arena team that I climbed with to first place every day for like 4 or 5 months before I was able to push through to the next meta. And so Padme definitely belongs on this list. And of course, now she belongs on list 1 with Lord Vader requiring her. So she's starting to double dip here. And I would even put her into category 3 as just kind of a strong individual character or one that you need to complete other teams just because she's got her own mission in TB. She makes those other Galactic Republic pilots like Jedi Knight Anakin and Ahsoka Tano. Obviously, they fit exactly perfectly into her team. And so if you're going to go for that fleet, I mean, you got to get Padme, and you really need to relic her to get her best use out of her anyway. So Padme is another great character that belongs in multiple categories, all 3, I would say. But until recently, I would say just, category 2 and 3 is where she has resided. And then, of course, I would lump Darth Revan and the whole Sith Empire squad into this category as well as category three because they're just good. But a lot of people went went pretty hard for Darth Revan, or still are going hard for Darth Revan near the beginning of their account life, and he's an excellent choice. He currently, I mean, he can even counter several Galactic Legends himself, with his team, and maybe add Watt in there. He's just a very, very powerful A tier character, and one that many people relicked up early on in their careers. So he would belong in this category too. This category for new players, this is a super important decision that you have to make. What is my first, or what are my first few teams that I'm going to heavily invest in? What are they going to look like? I would highly recommend that you try to pick characters and teams that belong in category three or category one, as well as category two. So get double use or even triple use out of them, because the meta is constantly shifting, and obviously Galactic Legends are the meta right now. And so any teams that you're constructing that are not Galactic Legends either need to be working towards Galactic Legends, or they need to be very strong and useful teams that will have a very long shelf life on your account and will be worth the relics that you put into them early. So this is, for example, why, even though Geonosians are a really strong opening play in terms of the first team that you go for, Geonosians can counter a lot of things if properly invested in. But the issue with Geonosians is that they are very singularly focused. Like, their own team is where they work. There's not a lot of use of them outside of their own team. And yes, they do provide a strong early fleet, which is another reason why a lot of people recommend going for them, and why I wouldn't fault anybody for going for Geonosians early on, because they kind of double dip. They allow you to just make one really strong squad and fleet arena team early on. So they're very good in that regard. But when you start looking at using them outside of category two, none of them are Galactic Legend or Epic Confrontation requirements. They are required for the Wat Tambor mission, so you do need to invest in them at some point at a certain level, but I can tell you that my Geonosians are all still Gear 12, and I can complete the Wat mission just fine with that. And so the amount of return on investment for Geonosians for me at this stage is not high enough for me to warrant working on them anymore right now. Eventually, I will want to relic at least a couple members of their team for the very last part of Darkside GOTB, as well as just having them as a more usable team in Grand Arena. But they're not, in terms of return on investment, they just really don't hit any of the other categories as well as some of these other teams. And so just remember that when you're choosing your first or second squad arena teams that you're going to work on, remember to try to get as much double dip and triple dip action as you can out of those teams, because that's going to set you up for long-term success. Okay, so I've kind of rambled on about that a little bit more than I wanted to. So let's move on to the third category. This is the meat and potatoes anyways. The third category is strong individual characters, or characters that you kind of have to use to finish in order to make a strong team that you already have other parts of. Or maybe some TB requirement, like Shakti and clones, for instance. Or Geonosians for for Wat Tambor, although you don't really need to relic them for him. So let's talk about the characters that are in this list for me. I wrote a couple of them down. So Dark Trooper is one of these characters. He is not a Galactic Legend requirement. He is not, at least until recently, Troopers were certainly not a viable opening early game team that you would want to create. But Dark Trooper himself is absolutely fantastic, because with him you transfer form the trooper team, along with him and Piet. You kind of need both of them, but those two characters have really revitalized the trooper faction well beyond what they used to be able to do. So before those two characters, troopers were kind of relegated to Night Sister and or Bounty Hunter killing team. You can kill them for 60 banners in Grand Arena pretty reliably, but do you really want to invest all the gear and farming that you and mods that you need to make that trooper team, just beat another B tier team? The value is not really there. However, with the addition of Piet and Dark Trooper, now your Imperial Trooper team with not super heavy mod investment can reliably kill teams like Darth Revan. And and I'm not even going to mention, or not even going to go over the Sith Eternal Emperor counter, because that counter is almost certainly going away here in the next month because of the changes that CG announced. But even still, if I can use one singular fast speed set on my troopers team and then put a bunch of slower offense heavy mods on the other guys, and I can reliably kill a Darth Revan team, like a full Relic Darth Revan team, fast Darth Revan and everything. All I have to do is have Piet go first, and he's got a 20 speed head start on him because of Veer's lead. So as long as I can invest one decent mod set on Piet, everything else is really cheap for killing a Darth Revan squad. That Darth Revan has been a thorn in the side of GAC players for years now. He's been kind of the gatekeeper between the A tier teams and the Galactic Legend type teams. And so being able to kill him reliably with Imperial Troopers is a huge punch up, in my opinion. And Dark Trooper and to a lesser extent Piet are what allows that counter to happen. So Dark Trooper, huge value to that faction. The fact that other troopers are required for the Sith Eternal form anyways propels him to a must relic status at some point in my mind. And actually, he's actually my most recently relic character, and so I guess that's why he was forefront on my mind. So other characters that kind of similarly fit this mold. Commander Ahsoka Tano. Now, I realize not everyone is going to have her. Obviously, only people who are 4 million GP and above have even had a chance to unlock her yet. And you have to do exceedingly well in Conquest thus far to have gotten her. But eventually more people are going to end up unlocking her. And she is an exceedingly powerful character that goes in multiple different teams, makes each of those teams much, much stronger, allows for counters that wouldn't be possible without her otherwise. She is an extremely powerful individual character that should absolutely be reliced. And I took her to relic within 3 minutes of unlocking her. That's how insanely good her kit is. And I don't have Beskar Mando, and I don't have Galactic Legend Rey, two of the best teams that she goes with. And I still just went straight for her because her kit is timeless. Her kit will fit into the meta somewhere for years to come. So absolutely invest in her, even though she's not technically required for anything beyond herself. Two other characters that are a little bit changing gears, I would say, would be Nest and Old Daka. Now, these are more questionable, more subjective relics, and certainly not everybody is going to want to relic these characters, depending on where they are in the game. But I can tell you, I have reliced both of them, and I have gotten definitely more return on my investment than I put in, and that's because of their unique kits and the way that they allow me to craft my offenses and defenses in Grand Arena, and allow me to take out sometimes fully reliced 5-man teams with with basically just them reliced. So in the case of Nest, I took her to Relic level 7, which is a very heavy investment. I've got all 6 dot mods on her. Tenacity and offense are as high as I can possibly get with a lot of health secondaries. She allows me to solo many B tier teams in Grand Arena. I have gotten 63 banners with her, just her, on quite a few different teams, including bad Mon Mothma teams, um, all the way up to even Padme teams. Certain Padme teams are nest food if you have her modded correctly. So considering the amount of investment that I put into Nest versus being able to take out an entire Relic Padme squad, that's really good return on investment. So even though Nest doesn't really lead to anything, she's not required for anything. She's so powerful in and of herself that if you are a Grand Arena fanatic like me, I would definitely recommend considering the heavy gear investment that she requires and mod investment in order to get her up and running because she's such a powerful tool to have. In the same way, old Daka, she doesn't solo things, not technically anyways, but if you relic her and give her a good health mod set, sometimes crit avoid arrow, if you want to go that route, that's a pretty good route too. She can basically single-handedly kill a very high investment General Grievous team, especially the BB-8 versions that people like to set to prevent other counters. So basically, old Daka revives all of her other Night Sister counterparts, and her cooldowns get reset every time Night Sisters die. So General Grievous AoEs, kills the other 4 Night Sisters, old Daka survives, gets her bonus turn meter, she goes, she revives everyone, somebody else dies, her cooldowns get reduced, basically rinse and repeat until Mother Talzin's Plague does its job. So it's not a 100% counter, but it's reliable enough that I've used it multiple times in Grand Arena against specific opponents. It allows me to set a much more difficult defense while still being able to clear a relatively difficult General Grievous team that I otherwise would not be able to. So old Daka, very good investment. Additionally, allows you to complete tier 1 of the Night Sister Assault battle. Just a really good return on investment for one relic character. So consider Daka if you have a Night Sister team at all, but just haven't pulled the trigger on her. She's a way to get a usable, complete team for low investment. So let's talk about characters that fit into all of these categories. These are the primo characters that you should be heavily considering when constructing your early game roster. So I've written down 3 of them. There are more than 3, but I'm not going to belabor this podcast any longer than I need to. So the first character is Darth Vader. Now, I know that Darth Vader is going to get changed fairly soon, but his kit will largely stay the same in terms of what he does for you. He just might not be able to kill Galactic Legend Rey quite as easily, especially without his partner in crime, who I'm also about to talk to. So Darth Vader, he fits in all of these categories. He's a requirement to get Jedi Knight Luke. He's an absolute monster as a first or second squad arena team. If you're going Empire Fleet first, his ship is critical for that fleet as well. And I mean, you're going to get value out of him throughout the entire game. His Merciless Massacre that he got reworked to get is an insane ability. It's like Galactic Legend level insane. If he had that Galactic Legend unique tag that all of the other GLs have, he would be a Galactic Legend, like no question about it. That's how powerful he is. So Darth Vader fits into all 3 categories. Absolutely invest him, relic him if you haven't already. He is a monster. In addition, Grand Admiral Thrawn, his partner in crime, he is losing the ability to fracture Galactic Legends here at some point, but Thrawn's kit is so incredibly well done. It's hard to overstate how useful he is. He can lock down another character for like something like 3 or 4 turns, basically rendering them, useless. So you can take down your opponent's, biggest threat. You can control it while you're taking down the side pieces, and then allow your entire team to fully concentrate on that threat once Fracture comes out. Of course, he's very good at taking advantage of ability blocks by stunning them with an irresistible stun on his basic. The turn meter swap and protection regain is amazing for theory crafting, allowing for counters, allowing other characters to outspeed your opponents when they otherwise wouldn't. Just an incredible piece. Additionally, he is, of course, required for Sith Eternal Emperor, and he would no doubt be an excellent part of any early game squad arena team. And he is a fleet commander as well. So um, I'm not saying that his capital ship is the best. It certainly isn't, but it's definitely usable, especially in early game. And so when you're looking to be efficient, Thrawn is an excellent way to do that. He provides so much. And then Grandmaster Yoda. He also fits into all three of these categories. Of course, you have to make him Relic 8 to be able to get Jedi Master Kenobi. He is absolutely a part of any early game Jedi teams. He's very easy. His event is very easy to get. You just have to, have 5 Jedi farmed up. He is exceedingly powerful with the turn meter manipulation, the foresight, the buff spreading, and the special damage. He is just a monster. Absolutely relic him as soon as you have a usable Jedi team. So those are the characters that I had written down to absolutely talk about, regardless of what your account is looking like at the present state. These 3 characters will help you if you do not already have them relic, and I highly encourage that you do that. So, in closing, I would like to note that, again, categories 2 and 3 are the ones that tend to lead to variation in people's accounts. Category 1 is static, like either they're required for something bigger or they're not, right? And so you're going to see basically every account that has the end game character is going to have these worthless or near worthless relic characters in them. So there's not really a whole lot of choice in that regard. But and additionally, category 2 is mostly set for most of you who are listening to this. You've pretty much already probably passed early or mid game, and if you haven't, that's fine. Hopefully, this has given you something to think about. But the majority of players have kind of first 2 categories. They don't have a lot to say about it. It really is category 3 where strong individual characters or 1 or 2 characters to complete a team that you otherwise have parts for. That's really where the choices lie, and that's where you want to be focusing your strategy and your decision making power, is on this particular category right here. So just to give you a little bit of insight on what I'm currently thinking about my roster is 5 million GP, and I just recently got my 3rd Galactic Legend. So I have Jedi Master Kenobi now. I'm currently farming his ultimate mats. Could have that in about a week or so. But in terms of where I'm going next, obviously with the changes that CG has announced and the new characters, I will be looking at more Galactic Legends, and also the newest capital ship that's been announced that is almost certainly going to be the meta. The fleet meta is extremely stale, has been for the last year and a half. And so I have no doubt that they're going to make the Executor the most powerful ship. And so that's kind of where my decision making has largely pointed now. I'm going to be saving up for requirements on that so that I do not fall behind in the fleet arena and or the fleet GAC meta. That's very important to me, and I don't see as much return on investment on any other path that I go to, at least immediately. And this will allow me to continue to protect my current income in the fleet game. So that's kind of where I'm pointed right now. There are some other characters that I've had my eye on for a very long time and have been thinking about investing in for the last year or so, or maybe even more. So I'll just give you a little bit of insight into those characters. There are 2 Jedi that I know I want, but I'm not sure that they ever quite meet my neck. This is the next character that I'm going to relic, that sort of requirement. So Bastila Shan, the light side version, obviously very powerful piece of the Jedi Knight Revan, Jedi Knight Luke counter to SLKR. I have never found the bandwidth to relic her. She's sitting at G11 looking for stun guns. In a similar vein, Joe Lee is also sitting at gear 11 for me. I've never found the bandwidth to complete my Jedi Knight Revan team. And be able to move other Jedi off of that team onto a different team. I do think that those are valuable relics to have. They will give me a lot of flexibility, both in TB and GAC, and I certainly would want to get them. The only issue is, what's the opportunity cost? What am I giving up to relic them versus something else? And they've never just quite hit that top slot of this is who I'm relicking next. Maybe they will in the future. We will see. But that will probably happen. If it does happen, it will be after Executor for sure. Although I'm probably, honestly, with the changes that are coming, I'm probably looking at going for Rey next. We will see. Speaking of Resistance, that's kind of the other two characters that I've been looking at for a long time. Obviously, with having Jedi Master Luke on my roster, I have a Relic 7 Jedi Training Rey. And I also have Relic 7 R2-D2, and I have a Relic 3 Veteran Han, because those are all requirements for the different Galactic Legends that I have. But so far, I have only brought BB-8 to Gear 11, and I have not farmed either of the Resistance heroes, either Finn or Poe, that goes so well with Jedi Training Rey and allow her to punch up on certain teams or provide a much heftier resistance. You see what I did there? On defense. And so those two, specifically BB-8 and the Resistance heroes, those characters are ones that I've had in my mind for a very long time. I want to get them relics so that I can do more with my Jedi Training Rey team than just beat B-tier teams like Bounty Hunters and First Order that are on defense. And eventually I do want to get to them. And if I do go to Galactic Legend Rey, then I will have to get to them. But they've been on the back burner for me as well, just because they haven't quite met the level of usefulness, besides just being requirements for a GL that I require at my roster's current state. I have a lot of other characters that I can go for that would help me out tremendously, and they just haven't made it to the list yet. But certainly very powerful characters, and certainly worth looking at, especially if you're thinking about going for Galactic Legend Rey in the near future. And she looks like she is definitely going to be a huge force after all of these changes go through, which is why I'm highly considering going after her next, because putting her with Commander Ahsoka Tano on defense is going to be a nightmare for a lot of players. So that was a very small detour. Just wanted to kind of let you know that I struggle with the same sort of decisions that everyone else struggles with in terms of where do I invest my resources. I really want to push these green buttons and make my roster stronger, but at the same time, I also want to make good, informed decisions that give me an advantage competitively, both in territory wars, grand arenas, and squad arena. So that is going to wrap up this episode. Hopefully it was at least somewhat helpful to you. This is always such a huge topic of discussion, and pretty much all of the main channels, somebody will ask some sort of variation on this question. And so I really encourage you to try to break down the decision into, well, how universal is this character? How many different uses am I going to get out of them? And how long of a life does this character's kit look to have? That is one thing that I didn't really get to touch on very much, but definitely keep that in mind when you're making your decisions, that characters' kits, some kits are more timeless than others. And that is a very large factor for me in determining who I am going to invest in if they are not part of a GL or EC requirement. So with that, I will sign off. Please, if you have questions or any comments or anything at all, don't hesitate to tag me or DM me in Discord. You guys know how to get in touch with me. And thanks for listening. Peace out.